Kingdom Hearts, released all the way back in 2002. It's so old that Square Enix wasn't even a company yet. But how was it meant to be played? What was Nomura plotting all those years ago? Well, we can never be sure if he envisioned this series to spiral into as many directions as it has, but we do have one relic of the past to guide us: the official strategy guide. Yes, my childhood self was no doubt roped into wanting this expensive add-on, but now this is as close as we can get to playing Kingdom Hearts as Squaresoft intended. So I'm going to play through the game following the guide to the letter. The guide starts off with an overview of the characters and shows what level you learn different abilities at. Looking down the page, as a Kingdom Hearts veteran, I know that I need scan as soon as possible. Editor's note: my past self is an idiot. I should have looked a bit more to the right and saw the much more important second chance. I didn't. Anyway, it goes on to do the same for some key characters and every party member. Yeah, right from the get-go, it's gonna spoil every Disney world we visit. Or give us something to look forward to, depending on your perspective. It also gives us useful hints, such as spoiling the Hollow Bastion boss as Maleficent, so we can learn the cheer ability. Actual useful insight can be found across the page, pointing out that MP gift is when Goofy becomes invaluable. So, is the guide telling us to shelve Goofy until we get it? Well, let's wait for Deep Jungle and see. After that, we get a basic how to play guide going over the controls and giving us our first tips. You can carry out a soft reset by... Wow, the game expects us to fail before we begin. Well, the more you know? Now, it's finally time to dive into the heart, and we have to choose our difficulty. The guide doesn't push you towards either direction, except making expert sound very painful. But, of course, we want to show our bravery, so expert it is. So, we dive into the heart, and the guide details what happens depending on the weapon we choose and the answers we give. But, weirdly, the guide splits the initial dive into the heart between page 18 and page 45? Okay, so we'll come on to that in a bit, but between them is a lengthy guide that gives the game's terms, menus, and some mechanics a full run over. And quiz time for Kingdom Hearts fans, because I even learnt a few new things on this guide myself. Like, I never noticed the lock button changes depending on how close you are to the target, and this completely blindsided me. Apparently the triangle button calls allies to our aid, and all the times I've played this game, I don't think I've ever tried that, so I guess we'll find out what that does. Equipped with this knowledge, we can finally get onto the main guide, and thankfully, the guide assures us there is no bad choices here, so let's get Scan. I think this was actually the choice I went for as a kid. We give up on our friends, beat up some Heartless, and again, the guide says to do whatever here. So we punch in the first three options and keep going. For our next battle, the guide says we can't lose, so I decided to just stand here, get hit a bunch, and... Oh, you actually can't lose this battle. We can just stand here forever and Sora's not going to die. Well, interesting, but we still do need to beat them up. Onto Darkseid, it says we can attack its hands and its head, but says nothing about dealing with the Heartless at spawn. So we'll just have to leave those alone. A strategy that seems to work. So far so good, and we've even learned something along the way. Now on to the Destiny Islands. The guide instructs us to immediately set out to find our first 4 items. Tells us to go right next to Riku for the log, but not fight him, so we can save our competition for the next day. Map included is actually quite handy for finding these items alongside the description, so we have no trouble finding what we need. It does say we could put in some battle training, but each section also has a to-do list that my younger self has filled out throughout this guide, and it makes no reference to training, so on we go to day 2. Second day commences and we are led to the race with Riku, where we can name our ship. What better name than subscribe? You could consider that if you wanted. There's a great button for that here. Anyway, the guide gives no racing tips, so we're on our own. It's a brilliant start as our careful footwork leaves Riku falling in the trap left for the player. However, I can't remember how to actually grab this, and the guide doesn't help, so we fall with Riku literally walking into the lead. Thanks to him keeping this pace, we managed to barely overtake him at the finish line, and we will ride the subscribe train forevermore. I mean, come on, Riku is literally walking here. He wants you to subscribe too. Anyway, we get another shopping list which goes by swimmingly, except for the first error in the guide, as it tells us to lock onto fish to find them. I was spamming R1, and all I found was Tidus. It would not lock onto a fish, even if I was right next to it. The map does show the location of the fish, however, so we do quickly scoop them up, but it's weird it doesn't work. The rest of the items we collect without a hitch. The guide grants us the option to get the Protect Chain, and while this is optional, earlier in the guide's how to play section, it urges us to ensure our party is equipped with the most up-to-date weapons and accessories, so of course we grab it. We equip it, retire for the day, and awake to utter darkness. We're told Sora is attacked by countless shadow creatures, so I let them hit me a few times to stay true to the guide and make our way to Riku. Before long, we face Darkseid once more, and this time the guide mentions the shadows, so we can beat them up this time. It also says we must hit the monster's head with a deflection, which isn't a mechanic I knew about before, so we get a few of those in and defeat it, after a few deaths. Expert hits hard. The guide has a page on Disney Castle, despite it not being playable. Then we make our way onto Traversal Town. Our first matter of business is to pay a quick trip to Sid and say hi before watching this guy meet his demise. We have our first Heartless battle out in the wild before the guide gives us two options. We can go back to Sid immediately, which we do because it's listed, hello again, or we can explore the city, but the guide doesn't really push you into this, so we go back and are quickly forced into a fight with Leon. It says we should see some cutscenes with Donald and Goofy first, but if you follow the guide's initial suggestion, this doesn't actually happen. The guide notes that it doesn't matter if we win or lose this fight, so offers no tips, it just expects you to lose, which is fair as I quickly get annihilated. The next step is to follow Leon's advice and ignore the small fight and head immediately for the boss. Traversal Town can be a maze at the best of times, but for the first visit the guide is happy to ignore that and go for endgame. Seems a bit quick since we just got here, but we follow along, meet up with Goofy and Donald, and probably get beaten up 4 times in a row. The guide doesn't really advise you to prepare for the battle, buy potions or anything. Looking through the guide for assistance, the next page after the boss fight advises getting some potions. And later on as we reach page 173, it gives us some extra tips if we can't defeat an opponent. First, we can buy more equipment, but there isn't any at this point. Our strategy might be inadequate, but most of the suggestions don't apply. We don't have summons, magic, or even companions. But we can move Sora around more. We'll try that, I guess. The last option is to gain experience to level up, so the guide now gives me permission to grind against these soldiers for one more level. Next attempt with the guard armor. The guide does give us a few useful tips and some dubious ones. It suggests attacking the feet first from the side for some reason. I can't quite grasp it, but we follow along and kill those first anyway. The hands fall next, and finally it warns us when it spins 3 times, it's preparing for an attack. This gives us time to dodge just in time with our last sliver of health remaining. Before long, the guard armor falls. Turns out a level and getting Sora to move around more was all we needed. After the fight we learned fire magic and the almighty dodge roll, something I'm so glad to learn. There's a list of other things to do in Traversal Town, but they aren't on our to-do list, so we can ignore most of them for now. We do one, which is to update Donald's weapon as per earlier advice to constantly upgrade where we can. The last point on the to-do list is to enter the gummy ship, appropriately dubbed subscribe. Earlier in the How to Play guide there was a controls guide and there's a few generic tips later in the guide, but that's it, there's no hint to the actual routes you take along the way, but I suppose driving the gummy ship is pretty straightforward, so we go full steam ahead. Once on board, it claims we cannot do much in Olympus Coliseum for now, so we may as well go to Wonderland. We immediately encounter a problem in Wonderland on following the White Rabbit, as the guide instructs us to push the bed aside then drink from the table, but the table's looking pretty flat. After a dozen seconds of moving Sora around more, we discover we needed to talk to this doorknob. We'll have to bear in mind this tip whenever we get stuck. We make our way to the Queen and the guide advises us if we want to be quick, we can get one of the 5 clues and go back. It doesn't tell us to do anything else, so we just do that. Although I do find another clue by accident while trying to decipher this map, so we have 2. The guide says go back to the Queen, but that doesn't work. Talking to her does nothing, so we figure out we have to talk to this guard instead. Luckily, our clue leads to the Heartless, so the battle is a little easier. Wait, battle? Looking on at the guide, there's another page telling us how to get clues, but it's already told us to talk to the Queen and start the fight. The default mode of this guide really is trying to speed through the world without exploring at all. Through the exploration is optional, but you'd think it'd at least encourage the main gameplay mechanic of the world. Alas, to the battle, we can skip the rest of this page. The guide tells us to alternate between hitting the Queen and the tower. I didn't even know you could hit the Queen on my previous playthroughs, and her hitbox is quite narrow. But knowing it's there, we follow the guide and quickly beat the boss. Finally learn scan from the level up, and I waste no time equipping it. The guide next advises us to give this flower potion to become big, but has no hint on how to become small, unless we turn back a page. Following this section of the guide to the letter makes this very confusing, but eventually the previous page gives me enough. We light some torches and get ready for the Trickmaster. The guide reminds us that equipping scan is in fact a good idea, so even if it hadn't told us to manage abilities earlier, we could do now. The strategy it offers for Trickmaster is simplistic. It advises using fire will light it up and increase damage to Sora, but we avoid that, which was useful advice. Otherwise, this paragraph can be summed into strike as often as possible. which seems fairly self-evident, but that's just vague enough to employ our own tactics. We start jumping on this chair, hitting it a few times, and repeat until we can draw it into this corner of the room, which has a handy desk to repeat this process a dozen more times before Trickmaster falls. I feel like the guide really let us down here, because while it's somewhat obvious you can jump on the table, it's the guide's job to let us know these obvious things, just in case we don't realise them. However, at the very least, this would have been figured out if we followed the advice to move Sora around more, so I guess that covers that. Our to-do list is complete, and we can set forth on subscribe once again. Now, I'd have expected us to go to Olympus first, but the wording is very clear. It says, fly to the next world. Well, we haven't got warp travel yet. We can't go directly to Olympus, and it says the next world, not to go back on ourselves. So, Traversal Town isn't an option, which leaves just onwards to Deep Jungle. We see the world, turn the page on our guide, and it's Olympus. Guess we'll have to skip this page for now, as we can't go back out to space even if we want to. Deep Jungle it is, and Tarzan joins the team. We start with a battle against Saber, where the guide notes again that it doesn't matter if we win or lose, so offers no tips. But unlike Leon, we show the guides what's what and win this time. We watch Tarzan jump to his death and follow with glee after being abandoned on a planet where this can happen, but find a little minigame instead. We're soon reunited with Donald and Goofy and need to choose who to leave behind. Let's check out Tarzan's character guide and see a far better fighter than Goofy. Alright, well, that's good enough for me. See you later, Goofy. We find these slides very quickly thanks to the map, which, by the way, is one of the best, most useful and helpful parts of this guide. And then we set out to hop on some hippos. There's a helpful hint about attacking at the apex of a jump for a little extra distance, which we don't need here thanks to our impeccable jumping skills. It turns out to be useful throughout the rest of the world. We're advised that using magic on these wilted flowers stops the flow of energies, but there aren't any enemies to begin with, and it didn't tell us to save any mana, so we just leave them alone. We reach the treehouse again and get a genuinely useful tip from the guide that I don't think many players will have seen. To get this chest, you have to jump off the roof blind without being able to even see the chest, attack 4 or 5 times, then bam, chest. It has nothing useful inside, but still it's a useful tip. As we've seen so far in the guide, it's been pretty quick to just avoid unnecessary things and focus on the main story, but here we take a break from the action to brew a high potion. The guide says so, so we do, even if we don't have enough health for this to be better than a potion yet. Hey, the guide wants us to do it, so we did it. We see Clayton's evil grin manifest some heartlets that attack the poor ape, so we have to defend them. And enemies spawn in this room finally and kill me. But on respawn, Tarzan decides to just one-shot them, which is nice. To find the rest, the guide has the gall to suggest if we can't find any encounters, we should ask Jane. Guide, don't try and pawn your job off on Jane. I literally bought you to tell me. Oh, there they are. But why does it say to ask Jane when it literally gives us all the locations? Anyway, we encounter Saber again and try to follow the tactics to dodge an attack, but I get impatient and see this screen again. Following the guide properly and remaining patient lets us defeat Saber, then it's a few more fights until this thing. Up to here, playing's been pretty easy, but this was the first roadblock of the run. I looked at the tips for this boss going in. It says to focus the sneak first and attack Clayton as soon as we can, and that's basically it. Without anything else to go on, and the fact that you die in 2 hits on expert mode, I die again and again and again, and lest I remind you, cutscenes are unskippable in the first Kingdom Hearts, and losing this fight forces you to watch 2 more again. The most frustrating loss was when Clayton stuck himself on this platform that Sora automatically slides down if you approach. This meant I couldn't hit him and I just kept jumping towards him and then eventually dying. It was so frustrating. And the guide's tips aren't helpful, so I need to find tips elsewhere in the guide to help with this boss. Thinking back to our struggle against the guard armor, we have companions we can customize now, so we have another strategy beyond just moving Sora around more. We do grind another level up and get MP haste, which helps our fire spam, but most importantly we turn off the abilities that enable Tarzan to use mana on anything but healing. This turns out to be a godsend, as while I'm not good enough to avoid every hit, this lets Tarzan heal us up throughout the fight, and with a few more tries the beast is finally felled. Thank goodness the last page allows us to customize if we fail a few times, or I'd have been stuck bashing my head against that wall forever. Our reward is worth the struggle, however, as we earn the cure spell that means we can manage our own health much better from now on. We explore a bit more, lock the keyhole, and get a new keyblade the guide emphasizes we need to equip, which we were going to anyway, but well, we're forced back onto the subscribe before we even can, so we'll have to do that at our next stop, which, let's check the guide, is Traversal Town. It says we can't go anywhere else despite this mystery world right here. Well, the guide calls out Traversal Town by name, so we ignore the Colosseum again and land. Even Donald's on board with skipping the world. We equip our shiny new Keyblade and make our way to the secret waterway in search of Leon. We have to talk to him twice to progress the story, which is weird and easily missable if the guide didn't tell us, so I'm glad it did. He directs us to Sid, who gives us a package to deliver while he upgrades our subscribe button. The guide confirms that, of course, you should comply, so we do. I mean, what else are we going to do? We used the tip from earlier to cross the lake, and lose 15 seconds of my life. Don't do that all the time. Got it. Once inside with Merlin, he informs us he was sent by Mickey to train us in magic. But the guide makes no reference to this, so your life purpose goes unfulfilled. Sorry, Merlin. Same for this book. The guide says we can look before leaving. I mean, it's a cool book, but we don't need to read it. So we leave, get taunted by Riku, and continue along our quest. While the reverse armor is an optional boss, I managed to skip it as a kid, the guide advises us to fight it. So we make our way through the Gizmo shop, ring the bell 3 times, and get ready for combat. The guide says to attack its arms first, which is simple enough in guard armor form. Once it transforms, now its legs are its hand are its legs. What does it mean? This could not be less clear. It says over here that the hammer legs are, well, legs, and so I think we can safely say we should attack the legs first, which is the arms. If you have a headache, you're not alone. Other than this, it tells us to dodge roll underneath to dodge its cannon attacks, which is very problematic when it hovers here. Regardless, we hammer away at the Heartless until it falls. The next line of the guide says we are already back aboard the gummy ship, so we set off stat. It's also interesting to note it says Chip and Dale will inform us of a fill cup, whatever that is. We don't actually know at this point because we haven't been to Olympus Coliseum. Instead, we learn a fighting tournament is being held somewhere. Pretty random, but you do you, Chipmunk. The guide says we have to go to these warps next, so we do and end up in Agrabah. We ignore the enemy spawned as instructed and head straight for the alley. We arrive and briefly meet Jasmine before she's whisked off for the rest of the story. The guide directs us to Aladdin's home, where we first free the carpet, and soon find ourselves saving Aladdin in the desert. His first wish is to steal all of our experience by defeating these bandits.
And let me tell you what a doozy that wish was.
We check his section of the guide, and this time it doesn't insult Goofy, so for this world we swap out Donald to try that out. While looking at the guide for a second, I get absolutely murdered by this flying sword, and on respawn find my way to Aladdin's house again, and need to find the keyhole. It's behind this shelf. I have no idea how people find this without a guide, so once again, the guide proves its worth. It then guides us to these chests, which it instructs us to loot, but enemies prevent us from doing so, and once we go down we can't get up, so Aladdin just takes care of those things after an age. With our preparations in place, for the first time the guide tells us to save, so something big must be coming. Oh, it's just this pot centipede. It tells us to attack the front while in centipede form and the back otherwise, so we do and clean it up in short order. Immediately afterwards we see another boss fight, where the main tips are all about staying on top of the cave for the fight. It says to avoid executing lengthy combos to avoid falling off, so I stick to single-use attacks, and that doesn't work. Ouch. One useful hint, however, is that when it absolutely headbangs, if we just stand still we don't fall off, and that works, so we manage to clear up the boss in good time. Onto the Cave of Wonders interior, we are advised to dash ahead and jump into the abyss. A little ominous, but it seems to work. Then we need to swim up waterfalls, which again isn't an obvious feature, so I appreciate the guide, and make our way to Jafar. This fight is a pain. It advises us to go straight for him and attack swiftly towards the keyhole, but sadly I fumble and Jafar makes himself very hard to hit. Because I had to avoid a few attacks, which proved useful, and eventually we get to win. For Genie Jafar, it reminds us that we can hit the lamp to damage the boss, which will make it easier for us. And it does. This is a cakewalk, letting us seal Jafar forever. I found it funny to note the stat differences between these two bosses, or moreover the differences they don't have. Becoming an all-powerful Genie doesn't boost Jafar's attack or defense, just gives him a bit more HP. On our way out, the guide reassures us that we should still make it if we don't dodge everything, so I aim to hit as many objects as possible, and true to its word, we survive. We get a cutscene. Oh, Hades is in the game. We haven't seen their world yet. I wonder when the guide will tell us to go there. Yeah, that might not happen. Anyway, we get our new Keyblade, equip it, and set off to Atlantica, which, as the guide warns us, is not the journey that goes as planned. We set off from Agrabah, but multiple viewers failed to subscribe. I mean, subscribe takes too much damage and falls. I decided to take a quick look at the guide's gummy section to see if I can power us up. And while it's not massively helpful, it gives me the know-how to stick these random blocks on the front of our ship, just in time to be eaten alive. The guide gives us quite clear instructions on our quest to chase Riku, but among dealing with attacking Heartless all along the way, I take a wrong turn and end up back at the mouth. Trying once more, ignoring all enemies, I manage to get through quite easily, save as instructed, and fight the Parasite Cage. It advises us by sticking to its right arm we will be able to avoid most of its attacks, just not that one, or that one, or that. Okay, that doesn't work at all, but I do get enough hits in to take it out for now. We go back to the mouth and learn high jump, an incredibly important skill from a random chest. I can imagine the frustration of players who miss this, but our trusty guide leaves no risk of that. It advises us to use our newfound powers to get 2 trinities and a chest. This particular trinity I found troubling even with high jump, as we have to reach this roof. It's not until I step on this slight increase in height that I can make it, and for our troubles we get a mithril shard. Huzzah! We climb through Monster again and fight the Parasite once more. It gives us the same advice to stand under its armor attack in short bursts, which actually works this time. The boss is a bit taller, so we do manage to dodge a lot of its attacks here. Okay, maybe not that time, but on the second try, this makes for a pretty clean fight. Makes me wonder if they got confused writing these 2 sections and didn't realise that it works for one boss but not the other. We learn stop and get sneezed right out. There's another mysterious fighting tournament that I don't think the guide's going to direct us back to. We can, but only after the part directing us to Atlantica. So we set forth there once more and get eaten again. Well, okay, second time lucky. If we set up on Monster instead, we arrive and have to get used to the dubious swimming controls before being thrust into a fight. The guide assures us that lock on and the thunder spell would be very useful, so I look for thunder. Where is it? Oh well, Donald was actually useful and just soloed the Heartless while I was menuing. We keep him in the party for that valiant display and continue with the guide. It tells us about a bunch of shells scattered around, but says it's more important to reach Triton's throne, so we ignore that and press onward. After a lecture from Triton, we were told to head for the grotto without any hint as to where that is beyond clicking back to the map, but Ariel leads us there before long anyway. From there we have to hop on this dolphin, yet the guide doesn't say how long for. It seems a very pointless thing to do initially without the guide, but it lets us know this moves the dolphin onto the undersea valley. Lo and behold, we go there and there's a dolphin. It leads us to this sunken ship. This is yet another example throughout this video that really shows Kingdom Hearts' age. It came out in 2002 when YouTube didn't exist, so you couldn't just look up a video guide, meaning these paper guides had a real, genuine use. Anyway, the guide says we don't need to fight the shark, but it disagrees as it murders me, so on respawn we get revenge. It advises us to stock up on Aether for the fight, so I equip Sora with 4, then we can confront Ursula. One of the first tips is that we need not use Aether. Weird. The eels don't provide nearly as much mana as the guide suggests, so I use a few since it told us to equip them, and we move on to the most annoying boss yet. Ursula Part 2 has constant damage coming from all directions, and you have to avoid it without dodge roll or guide alongside a sloppy new control scheme. The guide advises we attack from behind or the side, which is good advice, but not how to get there, as it's very tricky to navigate. Initially, I assumed using our new Dolphin Kick ability would be the best, but it turns out that just sends you way too far away and has a large lag before you can attack, so I die a few times trying this. At least the guide tells us some more good advice on how to dodge her attacks, especially noting when she says we need to swim away ASAP. After a few more failed attempts, I readjust my strategy as the saving grace of page 173 advises again, turning off Ariel's offensive mana uses, giving the whole party potions, and making use of the effers left from the last fight. A particularly heartbreaking moment came when I died as Ursula had 1 HP remaining, but I sought revenge and finally she was defeated after a few more attempts. We receive a new Keyblade we hastily equip for our troubles, alongside upgrading our Thunder spell. Wait, but this is the first time we have Thunder. Well, better late than never. And speaking of never, as we set sail for Halloween Town, the guide notes we've a 70% chance to get intercepted by this pirate ship, so of course we do. It says you can watch the cutscene, then resume your journey, but as we look at the Neverland guide, it immediately gives us directions without a chance to look back, so see you later Halloween Town. The guide gives us a set of straightforward directions through some fairly linear rooms. We equip Peter Pan over Donald this time to mix it up, and it soon turns out to be the correct decision as Goofy levels up and learns MP Gift. Despite the early guide being a tad critical of Goofy, it assures us that once he learns MP Gift, he becomes an invaluable support character. So looks like Goofy is here for good. Since the guide emphasises how important this is, I make this Goofy's only way to use mana, and that soon proves to be a wise choice. Sora and Riku have a touching reunion.
You're stupid!
And then we're told to swap Peter Pan out for a Trinity. It doesn't say to add Peter again after doing the Trinity, so we go into the Antisora boss fight with Donald and Goofy. It gives us a selection of useful tips ranging from Scan being able to detect the real Antisora when it clones, and that this fight is a good opportunity to use Aero. And it's right, as 2 hits from Antisora kill me, so Aero is crucial here and I try to keep it up constantly. It takes a few tries until I finally fell myself, and with critical timing as I end the fight with no items, no mana, and even Goofy has no mana to use MP gift with. We find a pretty well hidden trapdoor to say hi to Wendy and learn Cura and Glide all at once, a big boost. We are quickly thrown into a gauntlet of Heartless and then directly into Captain Hook, making for one of the few bosses we can't enter with maximum mana by default. The guide tells us to run straight for Hook, but not where he is, several decks above us. We fly around and get some hits in as the guide goes on to advise don't use fire. Thanks, Donald. The last 2 tips are to ignore the Heartless, which I'm happy to, and to dodge to his side and attack, which is tricky in an area like this. This fight is much easier than Antisora though, as we have space to move around, and we take care of Hook, earning a trifecta of rewards. We can glide outside Neverland, we get a shiny new Keyblade, and we even learn the Tinkerbell summon, which may prove useful if the guide ever advises we use it. We return to Traversal Town to upgrade Subscribe once more before heading to Hollow Bastion. There's a few little jobs that advises we do. I find a few Dalmatians, so I turn those in. We finally get to upgrade Donald and Goofy's weapons now that we're back, and an old part of the guide comes back to bite us. It says we must always use the most recent gear, and I accidentally pick up 2 of these accessories from random Heartless, which give a minor boost to defense. Much worse than what we have. But the guide wants us to equip the latest items, so we're forced to, and our allies can take one for the team. As we're getting ready to leave, the guide drops one little innocuous sentence. Eventually, when you have done all you can in this and the other worlds, you will need to board your gummy ship and head for Hollow Bastion. Now, as I read this, the guide's intention so far has been pretty speedrun heavy. It gives you the main guide to get through the story, a few little side diversions, and that's it. We've even skipped 2 worlds, but now it wants us to do all that you can in the other world. All of it. How far do we take that? We could get every chest, we could defeat every Heartless, we could get every single item drop, we could potentially grind to the max level. We can do that in other worlds. But for the sake of my sanity, and as this video is fast approaching the half-hour mark already, I'm going to say it doesn't call out anything specific but Hollow Bastion, so we're heading there. Otherwise, this video would descend into another half an hour of me finding random chests in every world and fighting Soras 30 levels too high. Let me know in the comments if you think I made the right call, or if I need to fill this part out on stream someday. Alas, the decision is made, so onto Hollow Bastion we go. We climb up a few sheets of ice before...
Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we'll be counting down our picks for the top 10 anime betrayals.
Still, we are granted a beast in their absence, and the guide helpfully reminds us we can use triangle to make our allies attack enemies. While optional for the rest of the game, it's super useful here. It would be nice if the guide reminded you that your magic still works, as Fire can still mow down a dart ball or 2, but it's not too much to figure out. We're advised to jump into the abyss, which I always find an interesting request, and we complete some basic switch puzzles to unlock the main castle. Reunited with the Keyblade once more after the Goofy redemption arc,
See you later, Donald!
we face Riku for the first time. It advises us to attack from behind, which, given how fast he moves, seems unlikely, but it also suggests a backup to wait until he lands from a jump to attack, as he jumps, lands next to you, and then does nothing, so we get a free hit. Useful tip, it helps us win. It says we can add Beast to our party, so we do, but we're immediately required to bench him to do a Trinity while sorting through some books. The guide is quite handy to help locate these, alongside a guide to the emblem pieces in the next room. All in all, given how much of a maze Hollow Bastion can be, the guide was great here, as it gave us the quickest route to get to Maleficent. I remember even playing through 1.5, I'd wander around here for hours trying to navigate the lift. However, where the guide gives, it also takes. The start of this route said we go to Crystal Switch 3, so I look for 3 on the map. No, this doesn't look right. Oh, Crystal Switch 3 is item number labelled 5. Very helpful. Worse is a section on hidden chests, of which we can't even get them all yet, as it only appears after Kairi's rescue. Yet again, the guide spoils future events for literally no reason, as for a first time player it isn't clear if Kairi will be saved, but at least I already know, and hopefully you did as well. We finally reach the top and face Maleficent.
It is unstoppable.
We'll stop it.
And Sora's right, as she falls fairly easily. The guide lets us know to attack her from behind, which seems to be the advice for half the bosses in the game at this point, and then we can attack the platform to lower it. The fight immediately following this is much harder, the dragon. The guide suggests we position ourselves by the tree trunk and cast fire while making our party members attack. Okay, so I just do that for a while, and it notes this is going to require a lot of ether, and we have 1, so this won't work. It doesn't offer a backup plan either beyond some basic tips, leaving us to fend for ourselves. It's a hard battle, especially as we do feel a bit underleveled thanks to skipping some worlds, but it does offer one great piece of advice we can use for the rest of the game. As with other boss battles, it is a good idea to summon Tinkerbell. Quite why it only brings this up after 3 boss battles in Hollow Bastion is beyond me, but we can finally summon her and get a second life and some nice passive healing, letting us defeat her after a lot of tries. But it doesn't get any easier, as the next member of the boss rush is Riku's Keyblade form. The guide advises Sora must be prepared to heal himself. Of course, we've been doing that this whole time. Who else would heal us? Donald? Fighting alone does unfortunately mean we can't summon Tinkerbell, which makes this fight all the worse. We're told to strike from behind again and to heal up when he prepares an attack, which I do a lot. It fails to mention how useful guard is against Riku, as I tried on a whim, and it turns out for the first 2/3 of the fight, this is the best way to get damage through. It advises us when he takes on a dark complexion, we should move away until he returns to normal. We do this just fine until he's got 1 bar of HP left, where Riku sticks in this form permanently. We can't keep away literally forever, but while in this form it's exceptionally hard to find an opening for a counterattack. At least its devastating attack is actually no problem at all, thanks to the hint to wait in a corner, allowing us time to get in some easy healing or to reapply arrow. It's tough to get the last few hits in, but finally with some adrenaline pumping, Riku falls. The next section was my favourite part of the game as a child, as we wander around for a bit as a Heartless before Kairi saves us and we're forced back to Traversal Town. The guide lets us know that all the worlds have stronger Heartless now. Shops also update, letting us spend our funds on an upgraded weapon for Goofy. We can't afford the one for Donald, but that reduces his MP, so I'm not too sad about it. Speak to Sid and upgrade our subscribe button and get the fabled Oathkeeper from Kairi. It says we can do other things such as face exceptionally nasty bosses, which sounds like a terrible idea, and it definitely says we can, not that we should, so we don't. This seems a little early in the guide to suggest this, as waiting for the final rest would make so much more sense. You can earn a few extra levels. But alas, we're left to step into Hollow Bastion once more. I defeat one singular wave of Heartless with the Oathkeeper, before Belle gives us the Divine Rose to replace it. We climb up the castle once more before I grab a few chests as it suggests and find Oblivion, forcing us to abandon the Rose and lose a mana to ensure we had the latest items equipped. But at least it packs a punch against the Behemoth, which after the last 2 bosses feels like a breeze. We get up on the Behemoth's back, whack the horns a little, and it falls before long. I did use Tinkerbell, as I will for every boss now the guide has suggested this, and it did trigger, meaning I narrowly avoided death once, but that's nothing compared to the previous encounters. The guide makes sure we talk to Aerith to learn Kyurga before we leave and finally set off to the end of the world. This marks the last voyage the mighty subscribe will have to follow, meaning this is the last time I can remind you, and it's a wonderful time to press that button as going blocks fly by. Maybe even a like? Sorted? Great, we land in the silent wasteland and set forth along the path. The guide shows us a nice little map of where the invisible walls are, which is appreciated as we make our way through wave after wave of Heartless. Along the way you find not 1 but 2 Behemoths, which I summoned Tinkerbell for, as the last one was a boss fight, but this time it really didn't feel necessary. This was helped by an absolute ton of items and accessory earned along this path, with multiple power-ups and accessory upgrades that make Sora feel a lot stronger. We make our way through and are then told to jump straight down towards the light. The camera tries to trick us, but we arrive at the world Terminus. Well, we don't need to go into most of the worlds here. I do by accident a few times as I get lost going back and forth, as it does instruct us to find the treasure chests in Agrabah and Neverland, despite the equipment therein being a downgrade. We must, however, conquer 2 of the worlds as we pay our first visit to Olympus, defeat the Heartless, then do the same for Halloween Town. The guide even calls out Olympus, saying you may not have done this, showing that the guide does expect this eventuality. We learn second jumps just in time to make the endgame bosses a whole lot easier, find a familiar lab that looks like it'll be relevant once more in the next game, and come face to face with the first real boss in this world, Jellybot. We land as instructed to summon Tinkerbell and apply Aero to begin the fight. The only other hint we are given is to hit the monster's head from the side, not behind for once, despite that being better to dodge his flame breath and to move away from its ultimate attack. Thanks to our massive power boost before this fight, it settles quickly after just 1 death. We fight the Behemoth again before the last gauntlet of Heartless leading into the final rest. We take the guide's advice to equip our characters with our best items. 6 Mega Elixirs for Sora, perfect, and then proceed towards Ansem. For once, this is a boss we can attack anywhere but from behind, which the guide makes clear. It devotes most of the guide to explain why it's so annoying, and it's correct, as this move basically forces Sora out of the action for 20 seconds. After waiting this out, Sora gets the kill. Well, I say the kill, Ansem still has a lot left in him. We face Darkseid again, which the guide gives no further hints on, but none are needed, and proceed to fight Ansem alone. Beyond explaining there's an attack where Ansem is invulnerable, it doesn't offer many tips. One useful piece of advice comes in being able to guard against this ability, which proves very useful in applying damage throughout the fight. Before the final rest, the guide noted we wouldn't need much offensive magic for the final bosses, but it fails to note that under the effect of terrors, you can still use magic freely, so Firaga proves useful in nailing the final blow. With this form of Ansem defeated, the final boss ensues with the World of Chaos. We get an in-depth guide to the 8 stages of the fight, with the first part telling us, you guessed it, to attack from behind. I do this despite it leaving you no way to dodge these lasers and just heal through it. Next up, we destroy 16 shadows with ease, although they do look cool in this room, then have to defeat 8 cannons. It seems we can ignore these laser beams, so I do and die, which isn't great. Second time lucky, we take it out before going into another dark room to defeat some dark balls, as Goofy rejoins the battle before we face the face. We dodge it when it squints and attack otherwise. Then we simply fly inside its mouth, quite a gruesome prospect, but we must, and help Donald defeat some invisibles, living up to their name in this room. We get the option to destroy cannons or just go straight for the actual target, the nucleus, which seems best, so we do just that. Then we're on to stage 8, and the final step is to quickly summon Tinkerbell and take on Ansem once more. It seems we can avoid the explosion by going all the way down here to the face, what face? I can't see any, I don't see any. But Super Glide is a much easier method, and I'm surprised the guide didn't even suggest it. We concentrate on striking Ansem, as the guide suggests we could use a summon to finish the fight, but Tinkerbell is already here as instructed, so we just keep concentrating, and eventually
Kingdom Hearts is light!
the boss falls. And that is how you beat Kingdom Hearts as intended. Thanks for joining me on this journey. I think other than a liberal interpretation of this passage, we followed the guide more or less exactly, and ended up skipping 2 worlds in the process. That's all for this time, and
We may never meet again, but we'll never forget each other.
well, actually, I had this. So if you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments if you want to see Kingdom Hearts 2 and subscribe so you're ready for that to happen. If you've enjoyed the video, please give it a like and share it with a friend. Do you think the viewers will, Kyrie?
I know you will!
Well, there we have it. Oh, and a massive thanks to Papa C for inspiring this video. After seeing their great videos doing this with the Pokemon games, once I realised I had a Kingdom Hearts strategy guide, I just had to test this out for myself. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll leave you with my stats from this playthrough.